For some time now, we've been really looking at the life of the Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul experienced many different situations in life, many great situations, but many difficult and painful situations as well. And therefore today, I wonder, can you identify with the Apostle Paul in that you have given advice to someone or to a group of people about what they should do in a particular situation, but your advice was ignored? The result of it all is that it has led to difficult times for those concerned, those who sought your advice or who wouldn't listen to your advice, and it maybe has brought difficulty upon you as well because of your involvement or your association or your relationship with that person or with those people. Maybe they ignored your advice because they thought that you didn't know much about what they were dealing with. They went with their own instinct or the advice of somebody else instead. Or maybe it's a teenage son or daughter. They think that you don't understand what it's like as a teenager of their generation. As far as they're concerned, you're ancient. And therefore, they have gone with different advice or with their own thinking. Your advice has been ignored. And really what it has resulted in is great heartache for you as you're watching their life almost self-destruct. And no doubt it's it's bringing great heartache to them as well as their life self-destructs. And it's bringing shame not only on them, but it's bringing shame on you and perhaps your own family as well. Or maybe your advice was ignored because they didn't know you. Why take advice from a stranger? Because no one knows if your words can be trusted or not. Or maybe it happened because you were the only Christian amongst them all and they thought that you didn't have much insight into life. You're a Christian parent who never lived in the world. So how would you know what damage going with the world could really bring upon them? When the time came that the person or the people realized that they should have listened to you, how did you respond? Did you respond by saying to them, I told you so? And maybe you went on and on like that. Or whenever the time does come that they know that they should have taken heed to your advice, how will you respond to say if it already hasn't come to that yet? If it has come, I trust that they had the humility to apologize to you and admit that they were wrong and that really they should have went with your advice all along. If this has happened, I suspect that something major then has happened, and it's this. They now hold you in high regard and they're looking to you for advice on how to get through their dilemma, how to get out of their dilemma. There's been a change in their heart. There's been a change in your relationship with them for good. There's a respect for you now that perhaps wasn't there for a long time. And the outcome of their mistake, it still needs work through, but together you're able to work through it. You see, in Acts chapter 27, Paul has been granted permission to sail to Italy under the supervision of a centurion soldier, a man by the name of Julius. We pick up the journey whenever they are in a place called Fair Havens, which was near a city called Lasea on the island of Crete. And in Acts chapter 27 and verses 9 to 12, here's what we read. Now, when much time had been spent and sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, Men, I perceive that this voyage will end with disaster and much loss, not only of the cargo and ship, but also our lives. Nevertheless, the centurion was more persuaded by the helmsman and the owner of the ship than by the things spoken by Paul. And because the harbour was not suitable to winter in, the majority advised to set sail from there also, if by any means they could reach Phoenix, a harbour of Crete, opening toward the southwest and northwest, and winter there. Now, we see that Paul gave advice and it was ignored. No prizes then for guessing what happened next. Verses 13 to 20. When the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their desire, putting out to sea, they sailed close by Crete. But not long after, A tempestuous headwind arose called Euroclydon. So when the ship was caught and could not head into the wind, we let her drive. And running under the shelter of an island called Clauda, we secured the skiff with difficulty. When they had taken it on board, they used cables to undergird the ship. And fearing lest they should run aground on the Syrtis sands, they struck sail and so were driven. And because we were exceedingly tempest-tossed, the next day they lightened the ship. On the third day we threw the ship's tackle overboard with our own hands. Now when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and no small tempest beat on us, all hope that we would be saved was finally given up. It was a terrible situation. But then we're all familiar with the phrase, cometh the hour, cometh the man. Reading on in the story, verses 21 to 26, we read, but after long abstinence from food, then Paul stood in the midst of them and said, men, you should have listened to me, and not have sailed from Crete and incurred this disaster and loss. Now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For there stood by me this night an angel of the God, to whom I belong and whom I serve, saying, do not be afraid, Paul. You must be brought before Caesar. And indeed God has granted you all those who sail with you. Therefore take heart, men, for I believe that it will be just as it was told me. However, we must run aground on a certain island. What we see is that Paul now had their ears, as we say. They were all attentive to him. It was a rough journey for some time after, but what we know is that they all made it safely to shore on the island of Malta. And that's where we'll pick it up in chapter 28. But really, as we look at all of this, what are the concluding lessons that we learn from it all? Well, one of the things that I find interesting about all this is that when Paul's advice was ignored, he didn't criticize them or turn against them. Sometimes in life, you see, we have to bite our tongue and let them do their own thing and trust God to look after them in it. I think of the prodigal son. The father let him go. The father bit his tongue, and the father looked out for him as he trusted God to bring him back. It'll be tough whenever we do that, and it'll require much patience, but we're to hold on, I believe, to God all the more. Maybe that's what it's like for you as a parent today, as you've watched a child ignore your advice and go their own way. If we be patient and see it all going wrong for them, can I say also that we be ready then to step in to help whenever the right time comes, and be ready to take the lead when the opportunity presents itself to do so. Can I advise, don't go on saying, I told you so, because it won't help in seeking, or it won't help you in seeking to lead them through the pain and perhaps even the embarrassment of it all. What we see is that really Paul only said it the once. Verse 21, it says, Paul stood in the midst of them and said, men, you should have listened to me. That's his way of saying, I told you so. But in his next words, we see that he then moved on to bringing hope to the disaster. Verse 22, and now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. Really, the concluding remark is this. It's amazing in life how often when you have the patience that you go from zero to hero and be the one who saves the day. You go from zero to hero. We've talked in the past about going from hero to zero, but going from zero to hero is what still can happen in your situation. Trust God and be ready to give help to those who have ignored your advice. Thank you again. Joining with me. Have a great weekend. Sunday morning, back on live at 11 a.m. And God willing, I'll be able to communicate with you then as we study further in the book of Ezra. God bless and thank you.